Welcome back. We now talk security. Over 20 people, about 21, have so far died following that suicide bombing that occurred in Gwoza local government area of Borno State. Suicide bombers, all of them female. We even understand that some are even carrying babies, detonating IEDs, killing themselves, as well as people around them. What is responsible for this resurgence? That's the question we have on our mind, and the experts are here to provide us perspective as to what could possibly be the answer and the reason. We're being joined in the program via Zoom by retired Army General, Major General Cecil Sekaigbe. He joins us via Zoom, as well as Security and Defense Consultant, who joins us via Zoom as well from Borno State, Ms. Onyekachi Adekoya. General and Ms. Adekoya, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, General, let me start with you because clearly this is a very sad situation, and we're trying to wrap our heads around this to find out what exactly is going on. Let me get some of the perspective of the president. It says it is a clear manifestation of the pressure mounted against terrorists and the success achieved in degrading their capacity to launch offensive. He calls it an isolated case that will be dealt with. That is the president's characterization of what we saw in Gwoza that borders Cameroon on Saturday. How would you characterize what is happening with this situation?
Well, it's very unfortunate and sad, but you must understand the reason for suicide bombing. One of the principal concepts of suicide bombing is to maybe instill fear out of political effect and also as a matter of grievances. So isolated, but we have to watch the trend and the pattern it will take. Because suicide bombing is a clear message of showing dissension and showing, a kind of, ill feelings towards the government and maybe also as a way of revenge for an action that has taken place. So the characterization is key, and what happens after characterization is how do we track it and how do we arrest the ugly situation?
Let me come to you, Ms. Adekoya. You may also help us characterize this as much as possible, but in adding to how you described the situation, they sat down, they planned. They recruited these women. They tied these IEDs around them, sent them into the community. They detonated a few of them, about 4 of them. People died. So for them, it's success. How did we miss all of this?
Yeah, so we are looking at a number of social issues, and the characterization you have just made doesn't seem to suggest that this is anything new. As a matter of fact, it is known that a certain Bakura section of JAS has significant number of dedicated, as it were, suicide bombers, and who enjoy some professional treatment within their own sect. There's ideology, there's some bending of religion, some under the influence of hard drugs, and some other considerations they also have. So these are some social issues around these issues that we see. If you ask how did we miss them in particular, I mean, everybody has recorded that the last time we had a body-borne IED was at least way back as 2020. As a matter of fact, if you look at the statistics from 2023 to date, we've had about 173 cases of IEDs going off. Just a fraction of about 20% being vehicle-borne IEDs. The main IEDs that we experience in the Northeast are IEDs planted by major MSRs that have claimed them significant number of lives. I think this year alone, we've lost soldiers about 105, 106 to IEDs, roadside IEDs, about 22 to vehicle-borne IEDs. As to how we missed it, it's no fault of law enforcement or the army, as it were. We understand that from this particular case, the operatives may have come from the Mandara Mountains that borders that particular area. So it's not a case of how did we miss it. The MO is changing a bit. Somebody did note that there's been a record number of arrests of female support personnel to some of these armed bandits terrorists and the rest. So it's a whole lot of social issues around the problem, principally one of ideology, okay, and then some other interests that these operatives have. So as to why we miss it, there are those issues that make it a bit difficult. There's the terrain, there are issues of terrain that makes it difficult for an attacking formation to approach some of those places successfully and conduct whatever operations they want to conduct. And then there's religion, of course, those other macroeconomic instabilities going on that reinforce some of these problems that we have in the Northeast. So it's a difficult one. This does not in any way besmirch the good work that the Army has done in the last 3-4 years, really. As a matter of fact, the problem that the Borno State government is now having is that a lot of communities are now going back to their farmlands. And so the government is having a bit of difficulty even trying to keep up because of the relative peace and progress in what the Army has been able to do. So I don't think it's a clear one of, say, who missed what and when. Some of these challenges do occur, as the general has said, is to pick up the pieces to say, okay, what did we miss in this particular instance? I think what was missing in this case was a case of a bit of complacency in understanding again the double tap strategy. When the first IED went off, the next natural thing for people to do is to rush to the aid of fellow citizens who are in distress, and thereby giving the would-be attackers another opportunity for mass casualty, which is why perhaps this number has also risen. So I think some complacency may have set in either two peaceful communities. So I think we'll take the incident from here and see what lessons can be drawn. So it's not about who missed what, if you ask me.
I'd just like to quickly follow up on that. I'm glad that you touched on how, the explosion of IEDs planted in some communities, led to the loss of security operatives. I recall civilian JTF died sometime in an IED explosion in May. And after that, we've also recorded the death of some security operatives. But in addition to that, the state governor had also been, advocating that we must not relax on the fight against insurgency. So to that extent, shouldn't there have been a follow-up on the possibility of the presence or the return of insurgents, particularly in that part of the Northeast, such that events like the one recorded on June the 29th could have been avoided?
It's a very good question you raise, and sometimes, the public is also not aware of all that the military is doing. At the risk of sounding like the military spokesperson today, I would state the facts as it is. There's been an initiative by the Army to support the efforts of the Borno State government in helping farmers return to their farmland. In this particular instance, it may not be unconnected to some GSF clearance operation. I think the Army launched a Operation Mountain Sanity, an operation like that, to clear that particular area and also give farmers the opportunity to return to their farmlands and support our food security drive. What may have happened may also be a retaliation against what these armed groups would perceive as an excessive support on part of the civilian population of the Army, because some of these operations was also, there were elements, hybrid elements of the CJTF, different Army formations that moved to clear that particular area. The level of success of that operation or the objective set by the Nigerian Army may not be out there for public consumption, but some of those operations has happened. There's also a risk of a blowback of GSF operation, clearance operations in particular. Sometimes there may be civilian casualties. Sometimes there may be retaliatory attacks, as we had possibly in this case. So it's not to say that, that's why I said, we just say what we know. Some of those actions are happening. Perhaps this is a bit of a blowback from what we know has taken place recently.
All right, let me come to general now. There are a number of things really that are playing out here, and maybe we'll try to break them down to understand. So there's the recruitment, the radicalization, and all of that. That's by the insurgents. But on the security side is intelligence gathering, vigilance, and the rest. You are all too aware about the operations and the peculiarity of the terrain. So speak to us about intelligence gathering. Is it tough to gather intelligence, to get charter such that you know that, oh, a group of 30 girls are being housed in a certain area, being radicalized for possible suicide bombing, and then strategize either to swoop in on them or at least to be vigilant such that you know when there's movement around and you are able to prepare well?
Well, intelligence gathering is a process in the sense that when you start, it has a value chain which you must have to maintain. Like my colleague said, the truth is that sometimes we exaggerate our failures and mishaps and downplay, our successes in that regard. Intelligence is an ongoing process. If there's a missing link in the chain, then all you need to do is to reboot, you reset, and come back so that it will give you the desired end. What you do, like this, my colleague said about this suicide bombing. Suicide bombing, you must understand the root cause of what led to this series of suicide bombing. And don't forget, like he said, there have been series of successes recorded by the military. And this is enough to send a message as, oh, you are degrading our people. So the next is to express our grievances to say, okay, we don't like what you are doing to our people and all that. So intelligence gathering must be robust, and I think the intelligence agencies are doing well. One good thing this administration has done is what they call interagency cooperation. They have done very well in interagency cooperation. I see the various services, intelligence and military organizations are doing well in this regard. So when you have this element of interagency cooperation, you are able to have an effective intelligence gathering. First of all, it's a process, like I said, you gather information, you process the information until you get the, intelligence. And not just intelligence, they call it just-in-time intelligence, so that you'll be able to serve the purpose of which it's meant for. It's a very Herculean task, and I want us to understand that Nigerian military are doing well. But let me point one very significant factor here about insurgency and terrorism. Relying on military solution alone will not take us to our desired. You see, they must have what they call a blend of the kinetic and not kinetic approaches. And that's what they call in the US government smart power. Now that the military has been able to achieve the very, very outstanding results in this counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism, there must be this element of, the governor, there must be proper governance in all these areas that have been liberated. If you leave them open the way they are, there's a need, for regrouping by the insurgents and the terrorists. Another thing you must also have to look at is, for instance, if people are hungry, if people are disillusioned, they become, easy prey for recruitment. Especially now that you have this electronic recruitment of terrorists and suicide bombers. So you have to blend the military approach to new non-military approach, which encompasses military, economic, social, and other factors you must consider. So it's not difficult to get intelligence. It's not difficult to gather intelligence, but it's a process, and that process, has to be accentuated by a lot of factors. For instance, intelligence now must be driven by technology. Any intelligence that you want to gather without appropriate technology will not give you the result you get in modern challenges. So it's all combination of factors which you must consider, so that at the end of the day, the government is trying, buying equipment, military equipment, motivating the troops, but we have to employ technology in this intelligence gathering. Like I said, interagency cooperation is the result. and the government need to upend the activities of, these people that are gathering intelligence and all that. Now, for this matter in question, don't forget that suicide bombing takes place with a lot of surprise. And the people that carry them are on unsuspected elements, like a woman carrying a baby on her back, So this is where the real intelligence comes in now, from a very, pedestal level to the highest level. So it's a robust approach, and it has to be guided as such.
And I think it's something worth reiterating that security operatives do not work in isolation. In fact, they thrive when the people support them with intelligence and the rest. But then that is built on trust, which is another conversation maybe for another day. But let me come to Mr. Adekoya now. So we've talked about the intelligence gathering, the vigilance part, but I want to switch it and talk about the recruitment angle yet again, because it's mind-boggling. And you imagine for a lot of people who stay in urban areas and they wonder, how is it easy for someone to be recruited and told, you know what, strap this on your body, detonate it, you'll die, the baby you're carried will die, other people will die, but it's a good thing. And I know that we've seen strings of abductions, what have you. The one reported in March in Borno State, I think that was in Gamborungala, which is, by the way, about 2 local governments away from Gwoza. And we've seen those things. So how is it easy or possible for these insurgents, radicalists, whatever term it is, terrorists, to gather them in an area and give them those lessons time and again, and such that they've been able to beef them up to that point where they are ready to go out there and do such damage? Let me come to you, General, again, and this is that question, straight and simple. General Sekaibe, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Yes, one significant area we're going to look at is what they call the radicalization and reintegration of, the people that have said they have repented into the society. I see a missing link in that process because it has to be deliberate. And 2, we know you have to do it with deep intelligence. Number 3, there has to be sincerity of purpose. The way you de-radicalize this set of people that say they have surrendered, and the way they are integrated into society, is an apocalyptic, experience. Because how do you now really resettle them? How do you gauge the level of de-radicalization? I see a missing link here because it become an easy tool for recruitment when it's not done with sincerity of purpose. So this de-radicalization process and the way they are integrated into the society calls for proper interrogation. So for me, this is, easy way of recruiting these people who are not sincere into the system to cause this mayhem. For example, you have to look at the purpose. There must be a purpose for an action. Like you rightly said, if somebody is tying a baby and he knows that he's going to die from a process, why is he doing it? So this calls for all our religious groups to play a prominent role in this de-radicalization process. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You gather a group of people somewhere for a couple of months and say they have been de-radicalized, and you reintegrate them into the society. It's a time bomb. And I think we have to check and interrogate that process so that they don't become a breeding ground of subsequent regrouping.
All right, Mr. Adekoya, let's come back to you. We can see that gender bias, enables this ease of movement. Because they are women, people may not really look at them twice. The target is the citizen. So let's take it back to the citizen before the army or intelligence agencies or anyone who can help comes through. How can they safeguard themselves? Because right now, I guess, I want to presume that people are looking at women differently in Gwoza just because of this situation. The secretary talked about it, that it's a tense situation, so that people are not profiled wrongly, as well as mistaking someone for something else. What should be the response of citizens in that area?
Yeah, to your first question on how people get radicalized, let's not forget that in the US, there's a case of a certain pastor that told the congregants that they were going to go to heaven if they committed mass suicide. So issues of religion being opiumic is not restricted to one sect or religion. It's just a social phenomenon, and because of the role that religion plays in our basic everyday life. So I would not say that the reintegration effort, the de-radicalization reintegration effort has not yielded results. I've talked several times on national TV about building a golden bridge. If it will cost us 25 billion to prosecute a head-on war, and it will cost us, say, 3 billion to take a golden bridge, reintegrate, resettle, do it properly, I think I'll go for the one that consumes less life. So reintegration has yielded some good results. You have the CJTF, you have some of the hybrid approach that is now being deployed, yielding results. There are some issues, but they'll deal with it. In terms of profiling, profiling is a basic security function. So what, again, this incident will have done is to enable the army update its ammo and its own ammo on how it profiles and assess, what will be a credible target. There are some actions that would give off some of these attackers. So I don't think that we have much of a problem with profiling, or that this one is then destabilizing society completely, because some of these people under distress also show some signs. If you look at the fourth incident that occurred, eagle-eyed operative had noted some suspicious thing about the would-be attacker, and then they engaged, and then the IED blew off, at least at a safe distance. So it doesn't change much really for trained operatives. I just think we just adjust a bit. And
Excuse me, Mr. Adekoya, I'm talking about citizens, not intelligence agencies.
Yes, I mean, you'll be amazed at the resilience of the people in these communities in how they deal and address with themselves. I mean, these are people who have lived through the heat and the heights of this crisis. One or two incidents doesn't change anything. All it just does, it will raise the level of alertness of the people. You can understand that it's human nature for life to go on. So people have decided to move on despite the crisis. And that comes with some level of complacency, that comes with some level of assumption of normalcy. And so what it just does, it doesn't change the way people see women. I don't think that will happen. Because even the locals themselves know, the locals have the information that, for example, we're not saying because ISWAP has not claimed this, ISWAP would typically not claim this because of their political leaning and the effects and impacts on civilian populace. There's a suggestion to say maybe the Bakura-led faction of Jazz is responsible for this, and that particular set is known to have a dedicated number of suicide bombers. That's known within the local populace. It doesn't change anything at all. It doesn't make people profile them socially, women in any particular way. The people understand that these are victims of circumstance, okay? And I don't see that changing anything, as it were.
Let's also look critically at this de-radicalization program. Now, this one specifically carried out by the Borno State government. We recall that in February, they had announced that 160,000 repentant Boko Haram recruits would not go back because they had sworn by the Quran. But now we're seeing this. And Mr. Adekoya, this is for you. I wonder if you have any ideas about their recruitment ground. And if we had 160,000 repentant Boko Haram members being reintegrated into the community, don't we have a bigger problem on our hands in the coming days if this leaves a huge question mark on that process?
Yeah, okay, good question. I would say also I suspect that the media may be fueling some level of, permit the word, a bit of hysteria, but it's good to be concerned. I think we're whipping this matter up beyond what it is. I'm in Maiduguri currently, and I've told you several times that I sleep even better in Maiduguri than in Abuja. It's still like that. Unfortunately, these things happen. Let me talk about the deregularization and the drawing down on numbers. It has significantly degraded the fighting capability of Boko Haram. that drawdown alone significantly. What you have and what we see from that drawdown was that some members moved over to ISWAP, left Boko Haram, but still they don't have and they do not pose a significant destabilizing force to Borno State, not even the Nigerian state as it were. Granted that we drew down on the number of divisions in the Northeast theater because of the problems within the Northwest. And it's also sensible because the numbers have been degraded. They are now hold up to opportunistic attack. It doesn't mean that a crisis is occurring. Their numbers have not swollen up immediately overnight, and it won't swell because of this incident. What they are doing now is to register presence or register some dissent against what is happening to them and what they perceive is support by the local population against them. So you can already see that local sentiment is already being mobilized against these people. What I think that the Nigerian government fails to appreciate fully is that in warfare, there are domains of warfare, and the information space is a critical domain that the government must play in. There is also a place for positive propaganda. And that's why sometimes I wonder what the National Orientation Agency is doing, and even propaganda tailored from the defense industry itself to weaponize the people against these insurgents. They are Islamic clerics, they are thought leaders, community leaders. You know, we can keep doing what is working. There may be some throws of a dying horse, some kicks of a dying horse as we see. Doesn't mean that overnight that there is a problem. Well, so I can tell you for a fact, I'm here on ground. Again, I just want to be factual. This is just an unfortunate incident. Shouldn't discredit the good work of the Nigerian army in any way. Well, and I'm shocked that you're saying the media is fueling hysteria. People have died. That is a fact, Mr. Adekoya, and you are aware of that. So reporting this and taking a look at what is going on is just the work we're doing to report the issues. I mean, the death toll by the emir is even said to be as much as 30. So we'll do our work. We'll report what is going on, ensure the Nigerians are well informed. By no means to fuel hysteria, but to keep Nigerians informed about what's going on there. And I imagine that's what you meant to say. But let me come to General, because I understand he has to run now. General, the PDP presidential candidate talked about the way the Tinubu government is handling insecurity generally, and he's of the opinion that, well, the posturing of this government is what is causing this. So let's sort of segment or put the responsibilities in segments. So what do you expect the Tinubu government to do as by way of a response?
Well, I do not know who that presidential candidate is, but I know that as a Nigerian,
that's Atiku Abubakar. That's a PDP presidential candidate.
This country, you know, trying to pre-referencing what the new government is doing. Like I said at the beginning, this government has shown resolve. They have not come with technical definitions of, victories or defeat in this insurgency and terrorism. So the appropriate thing to do is to reset, the military hierarchy and the security agencies, which they have done. Now they have to equip the military and boost the morale of troops, which they are doing. And three, don't forget that terrorism and insurgency are a protracted, crisis. Low-intensity conflict as is described. So it is not a go to the shelf to purchase. You have to work assiduously and continue to take them step by step. We should all come together as Nigerians and define, the problem before us and look for appropriate solutions to addressing those problems. To sit armchair criticisms will not help us. The Nigerians that are dying have no peculiar coloration. Politically, they are Nigerians, and that spirit of that we're Nigerians, comes before any kind of political innuendos or some kind of criticism of the sitting government. So we should all encourage the sitting government, to do more, and don't forget that whatever successes are achieved in operations are also a function of the cooperation with the civilian populace. So if we start to sing discordant tunes, as political leaders, it starts as a diversionary method and a kind of, will have a counter effect on how we proceed, these operations. So the government has seized the initiative. Usually those days we used to hear of technically degraded Boko Haram and some of those stuff. But if the government has known and identified the problem, that is halfway solving it. So let us all put hands together to encourage the government and not do unnecessary criticisms that will just be a source of distraction. If not, they need to do more, but they need to be encouraged to do more. We need to bring to the government, some of these areas that we think they should do more, and we should do it, with clear conscience, with a sense of altruism, rather than a kind of a distraction that may arise.
Major General Cecil Sekaegbe, retired Army General almost. Thank you so much for coming on the program and providing your own perspective to this particular issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Mr. Adekoya, you're still with us. So let's talk about going forward. The reason I use the word going forward is quite deliberate, because sometimes this thing starts and then before you know, it escalates beyond that particular geographical location. And then we'll begin to say, oh, we didn't nip it in the bud at the early part. So what exactly has to be done in going forward to ensure that this doesn't just happen again as much as possible? I know it's almost impossible for insecurity not to take place, but to the point where we're in this situation where everybody's on high alert.
Yeah, thank you for the question, which is why initially I had highlighted post-event, what should happen post-event. Now, communication and narrative management is very important to wit that we do not give the terrorists the oxygen they need or require for further actions. I give you two case in point. There was the Moscow bombing at the mall, Kronos Mall. You had the terrorist attack in Dagestan. And you can see how the Russians quickly rallied around their government to say the terrorists would not divide us, they would not exploit the religious divide within society to further perpetrate their crime. Crime is crime, and it will be called.
Like before, You can go ahead, Mr. Adekoya.
So, I mean, I think everyone, this becomes an all of society problem. So we must, as a people, seize initiative from these terrorists, reduce the oxygen that we give to this their heinous activity, at least manage it, ensure some positive propaganda. All of society, the NSA must look at doing some of that. That's on the soft side. On the hard side, I've just read out stats from open source intelligence. We have lost to IEDs about 106 soldiers this year alone. 122 of them have been injured, significantly injured this year alone. About 22 of them have been killed by vehicle-borne IEDs in the Northeast this year alone. About 77 of them have also been injured by vehicle-borne IEDs this year, and 6 killed by body-borne IEDs this year. These are Nigerians, these are fathers, these are uncles, these are breadwinners of their family. Their lives also matter. What I think that the government has to do is to resource the military correctly. But the government suffers some handicap, and this is where international diplomacy and politics must be sensible. We cannot be looking for weapons from those who consider us as strategic opposition to them within the sub-Saharan African space. Nigeria must have a defense industry that is able to cater to the needs of its military and to support the projection of national interest and national power going forward. Because the problem here is an equipment problem. If you did listen to me carefully, there was an operation Mountain Sanity deployed by the Nigerian Army. We have that from good authority from the locals. There was a clear period of aerial bombardment, but as Afghanistan, as the Mandara Mountains region, you can drop aerial bombs all you care if you are not hitting hard points and destabilizing the positions, the fighting positions of the assailant. You are not achieving much. After the aerial bombardment, we understand that the military did moving. But the topography of the place, it stacks up against an attacking force, giving the entrenched elements there some advantage. So I wasn't sure. We're not sure about the objectives set by the military, but some action is going on. For example, we are now in a domain of warfare where consistent and persistent ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, is the main speak now in modern day warfare. Reconnaissance attacks are also another way to go. So if we've not given the military what they need to do their job, we are not giving them a fighting chance, which is why I keep complaining about the attrition of our forces. And attrition is a big problem. Imagine 200 and something plus soldiers decommissioned. Basically, they have been taken out of action. What does that do? In a country where the PSC and the IGP are bickering over employment of police constables, 10,000 we're supposed to get by now. If the military clears up a place, the police should move on and hold ground. The police has a counter-terrorism unit that can support the actions of the military near the front lines. We don't have the police now because there's bickering between the PSC and the IG.
Indeed.
The same Nigeria is happening to the Navy, to the Air Force, and to the Army. Recruitment is not anywhere where it should be. So I think that on the one hand, we are almost tying the hands of our military personnel behind their backs, asking them to fight. If we do not give them the tools that they need and the personnel that they need, and if we don't shape correctly as a country, yes, go
Indeed,
ahead.
besides the structural issues, you know, that lack of synergy is also another systemic issue. We cannot exhaust, you know, the discussion as far as the Northeast is concerned. Let's go to the Southeast now, where we see that security operatives are increasingly becoming targets. And time and again, IPOB has distanced itself from the killings in the Southeast. You know, but when that was the case, sometime a few years ago, there were cases where they attributed the killings to, you know, politicians taking advantage of the situation. But now we're not in an electioneering season. So I wonder, you know, what you identify to be the continuing cause of the problem, fueling the challenge where security operatives are still targets for this phenomenon of unknown gunmen.
Thank you for raising the important question again. Proverbially, if the cat goes to play, then the rat takes over the proverbial house, as a matter of speaking. The security forces that we have currently are not able to fully dominate the space, you know, and to command presence to which that they can be more proactive. There are a number of structural issues. Then there are also the social issues, the sentiments for Biafra, sentiments, beliefs, like I said, like opioids of some sort. There are some elements within society that seem to suggest that these actors have force and support them. But there's good news. The Southeast has been ravaged for long by these issues. We have seen communities rise up against some of these elements. We've seen sentiments mobilized against some of these elements. Because for how long can this continue? We've seen, so there are telltale signs that we are now in the end state of this current action. That said, there will still be rooms for crime opportunity to occur. Remember that when you have different actors or threat actors as we call them, they have their own objectives, they have their own interests, and they will pursue those interests and objectives in ways and manners as they seem fit. What we now need to do is to have the structures, the capabilities in place to deal decisively with those issues. But again, we circle back to the issue of national orientation. When we took out history from the curriculum, we de-emphasized social studies. What we basically subjected ourselves is to a society where, you know, the fabric that whole society had become somewhat loosened and disintegrated, such that our value system has changed. I think that, again, the government must, as a way of national programming or social re-engineering, take the issue of social studies, civic duties, civic responsibilities very, very seriously, howbeit we must start now going back the primary schools, secondary schools, to reorientate the people on who we are as Nigerians and what we stand for and what are our values. Because as it were, there's too much opportunity within society for you to find willing hands for these kind of actions. Now, that said, you have in some of these places the unknown gunmen, you have political actors,
right.
You have court groups, you have the rest. Just to make the point, Howdy, I had raised a point about the president being very quick to make statements on some of these issues. I would rather like to see a situation where the NSA is making statements or the police is making statements, because once the president begins to say, we will do this, we will not tolerate it, he's exerting national political capital on these incidents, which can give grounds for political actors to leverage, because sometimes we play this kind of nonsense politics, forgive my language, in Nigeria, where we politicize insecurity and when some actors deliberately destabilize society to gain some form of leverage. So I think that we need to be careful around messaging in addressing some of these issues. Over to you, Kayode.
Right. Then comes a debate of empathy. The president was not at that Peace and Security Summit in Northwest, the UNDP Peace and Security Summit. His vice went, and you know what followed, the debate. Should the president have been there? Doesn't he care about the Northwest and all of that? So perhaps that's also another reason why you see the president releasing statements, so it won't appear as though the president is aloof and all of that. But you know what, that's just by the way, really. What we need is a peace and security to be a reality. I'd like you to maybe draw some inference, because I realize you've been talking about the splinter group in the Northeast, the Bakura, which some have said is a splinter of the Shekau group originally. And, the intricacies, what's playing out, because a lot of people just see suicide bombing, but they don't understand what's playing out behind the scenes. Even in the Southeast as well, where, IPOB says we're not the ones responsible, ESN says we're not the ones responsible, but people still say, well, it looks like IPOB, it's like your modus operandi. So do you understand the interplay of even infighting, perhaps within those groups, and how this may also be affecting the fight?
Okay, so that's a very knotty issue to try to untie, because there are complex webs already at play. Yes, we know that the Boko Haram Shekau-led faction was at odds with the Al-Bawani-led faction, which is, I think, at the heart of the issue were issues of succession. Who should succeed Yusuf, either succession by bloodline or, so at the heart of that issue is just a Shiite ideological preference for succession by bloodline. Even going back to the case of the son of the prophet, peace be upon him, the first known martyr. So there are issues of ideology, as it were, so these are neither here nor there in terms of the current infighting between Jazz and ISWAP. Okay, so that's there. So when they fight,
for those who don't understand what Jazz is,
out themselves.
For those who don't know what Jazz is, so we can break it down. What's Jazz in this sense?
Is Jamaatu al-Islam. That's Boko Haram.
Right.
That's what they call it.
Which is different from ISWAP.
Yes, so ISWAP is ISIS in the West African province.
Right. Please go ahead. Just to help people understand.
Yes, so my apologies. Yeah, so when they infight amongst themselves, they help us. It was the infighting that helped the Nigerian army and Nigerian people to take out Shekau, following which Boko Haram became significantly degraded. And the infighting between these two groups are also helping us to win, that they're also taking out themselves, making the job easy for the Nigerian army. So you see, even you really look at conditions on the ground, conditions on the ground would rather suggest that because of that division, the split, the schism between the two groups, they will continue to cancel each other out, aiding us. So they don't have the fighting force to hold ground and hold territory. They are insurgent groups. They are trained and adept in guerrilla warfare. The ISWAP group in particular, we understand sometimes receive foreign assistance in terms of training for some operations and some weaponry and the rest. But they are all holed up within that Lake Chad axis, holding very, very little operational space. So, I mean, that's to the heart of the issue. But like I said, for this particular instance, we suspect that due to the clearance operation, they attempted, it may be a reconnaissance attack, a probing attack. We're not sure what the objectives of the Nigerian army was at the time, but they did conduct an operation, Operation Mountain Sanity. And some of the objectives were to push out these insurgents from the farming communities, to allow the farmers at least go back to farming, to in a way also improve our own food security and help the people resettle and be comfortable. It is clear that this is a blowback from it. Again, maybe also we say that the effort was not completely successful to fully degrade and decapacitate that group further. It may also be that all the group simply did was to activate cells within the town to conduct this attack to give the government a black eye. That would be my own assessment.
All right, Mr. Adekoya, as far as death is the end of some of this quote-unquote madness, as it's called, it is a problem to all of us. There's an infighting that doesn't help anyone. I'm talking about cultism. Away from terrorism and all of this, let's go to Edo State. Elections will be up in September 16th or so. And I heard the governor clearly say one of the biggest problems he has is the issue of cultism in Edo State. A girl was just very recently, she was killed and raped and killed and all of that. So besides the big, issues of terrorism, ISWAP, Boko Haram, there is this that doesn't help anyone. And it's common in places, including places like Benin City in Edo State. How should the government begin to go beyond just complaining, to act, to degrade, if that's the right word, the capacity of these gentlemen to take their own lives and harm other people?
Yeah, again, it comes back to the issues of our value system as a society. Every region has its own peculiarity. Edo borders the southwest. I mean, as a matter of speaking, you can call Edo part of the southwest, some part of it at least. In the southwest, cult-related activity are the greatest source of risk. Even in places like Boko and Lagos in particular, and yes, Edo, another place. So to deal with the issue of, and again, it's important to deal with that issue because we are discussing Boko Haram today. Boko Haram started as Ekomok boys. In Adamawa, Yola, we have today the boys called the Sheila boys. I schooled in the southeast at the time when, if you recall, we had Bakassi boys, because at the time, some of the people conducting the kidnap and armed attacks, armed violence within the southeast were primarily cultists, cult boys who were used for elections, who got weaponized, and I'm part of the post-1999 cycle of electoral violence, which we're still having to deal with, was that, you had a slush of small and light weapons across the country, which these cult groups will use to rival each other for turf, for political patronage, and the rest. So, again, it's partly politics, partly all of society. Because some of these cult groups have their patrons as people in positions of authority. We can begin to mention them, but that's not even necessary. So they have backing to some extent from within society itself. So I don't think it's not a problem that government cannot sort out, because I recall then we had serious issues with cultism in Jos. And government was very clear. If you say cultism on campus, easy to deal with, because school authorities typically have their way of having their hands on the needed information, and that can be stamped out once the state government is serious. They can stamp out and say zero cultism and mean it and go after these people. Typically, they are known. The issue of cultism are just is not as complex as you have that of armed organized groups, but it is a breeding ground I think the bigger problem is politics and how politicians seek to use these different groups to their own advantage, thereby destabilizing the system further.
Mr. Adekoya, almost thank you so much. Onyekachi Adekoya is a security and defense consultant. Thank you so much for your perspective and for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.